Welcome to This Explainer. Today, we're diving into something you literally see all the time, but might not fully understand. We're talking about precipitation. We're going to take a structured, clear look at the global water cycle, zooming all the way in on the actual physics of microscopic droplets, and then pulling way back out to see how these tiny mechanisms drive massive global climate shifts. It's like a giant puzzle, and we're putting the pieces together.
To keep us perfectly on track, here's our agenda. We'll start with the mechanics of precipitation, then categorize rain, snow, and hail, and figure out how nature makes it rain. After that, we'll map out global patterns and wrap up with humanity's impact. Section 1. The mechanics of precipitation, the physics of a drop. Now, it's really tempting to look up at a dark cloud and just assume it gets too heavy and falls out of the sky. But the atmosphere is this highly complex physical system. Clouds don't just drop their water without a very specific sequence of events acting as a catalyst. So let's look at the physics that actually kickstart this whole thing. It all begins right here with the dew point. Basically, this is the precise temperature a parcel of air has to cool down to in order to become fully saturated. When air cools to this point, whether that's from expanding as it rises or just radiating heat away at night, it can't hold all its water vapor anymore. That vapor has to go somewhere, right? So it begins condensing, but here's the catch. It needs something to grab onto. It condenses on microscopic particles called cloud condensation nuclei. We're talking about tiny specks of dust, smoke, or even sea salt just floating around up there in the atmosphere.
Now here's a really fascinating scientific term for you: hydrometeor. A hydrometeor is just any particulate of liquid or solid water in the atmosphere. So clouds, rain, and snow, those are all hydrometeors. But notice that fog and mist fall into this category too. Fog is essentially just a cloud at ground level, completely made of hydrometeors. Yet fog doesn't fall. Why is that? Well, it's because the individual water particles in fog or mist are incredibly small. I mean, their fall rate is practically zero. To actually precipitate, these tiny droplets have to undergo a major physical transformation. And that transformation happens in 3 key steps. First, we have that condensation on the nuclei we just talked about. Second is collision and coalescence. You see, the atmosphere is incredibly turbulent. As these tiny cloud droplets get knocked around, they actively collide and fuse together into larger and larger drops. That's coalescence. Because droplets are all different sizes, they fall at different speeds within the cloud, constantly bumping into each other and growing. And finally, step 3, overcoming air resistance. Only when a fused droplet gets heavy enough to actually overpower the upward friction of air resistance will it finally precipitate and fall to the earth. And when they finally do fall, the scale is just absolutely staggering. 505,000, that's the volume in cubic kilometers of water that falls globally as precipitation every single year. To put that massive number into perspective, about 398,000 cubic kilometers of that falls over the oceans and 107,000 cubic kilometers falls over land. This incredible transfer of mass and energy is the critical engine running the Earth's entire water cycle. Which brings us to Section 2, rain, snow, and hail, categorizing hydrometeors. Now that we've got a handle on the basic mechanics of how water overcomes air resistance, let's check out the fascinating and honestly, sometimes totally surprising variety of forms this precipitation can take as it plummets to Earth. The sheer diversity of weather out there is amazing. First up, raindrops. And let's just bust a myth right now. Raindrops do not look like teardrops, no way. As they grow and fall, they actually flatten out on the bottom because of the oncoming airflow, taking on this oblate, almost hamburger bun shape. Next, we've got hail. This is ice that gets repeatedly tossed up by storm updrafts until the stones are just too heavy to stay airborne, sometimes growing up to 15 centimeters across. Then there's diamond dust. This forms in extreme cold, like around minus 40 degrees Celsius. These are tiny, simple, hexagonal ice needles that violently sparkle in the air. It's beautiful. And finally, precipitation isn't just an Earth thing. On Saturn's moon Titan, we've actually observed a slow falling drizzle made entirely of liquid methane. How wild is that? Well, let's bring it back to Earth for a minute and talk about snow. Snow doesn't just freeze, it actually grows through a really cool mechanic known as the Wegener-Bergeron-Feindienst process. Here's exactly how it works. Inside a cloud, you often have super cool liquid water droplets hanging out right alongside ice crystals. Because the water droplets are way more numerous, they create a highly saturated environment. The ice crystals then literally steal the surrounding moisture, causing the liquid droplets to evaporate while the ice crystals rapidly grow at their expense. These larger crystals then collide, stick together, and aggregate into those complex little clusters we know as snowflakes. And speaking of snowflakes, they can get incredibly large if the conditions are just right. 15 inches. According to Guinness World Records, 15 inches was the alleged width of the absolute largest snowflake ever recorded. It fell in Fort Keogh, Montana, way back in January 1887. Now, while most snowflakes are obviously far smaller and a bit more irregular, it just goes to show how super efficiently these ice crystals can aggregate. All right, let's move to Section 3, How Nature Makes It Rain, Triggers in the Atmosphere. We've zoomed way in on the individual flakes and drops, but now we need to shift our scale back up. What are the massive atmospheric motions required to force enough air to cool to its dew point and drop all that water? Basically, there are three primary lifting mechanisms that trigger precipitation. First is frontal activity. This happens when massive weather fronts collide. So, for example, you get a slow ascent of air over a surface cold front or ahead of a warm front, and that produces wide bands of stratiform clouds and that steady, long-lasting rain we all know. Second is convection. This involves really strong, rapid vertical updrafts that violently overturn the atmosphere in a localized area. This causes those short, intense showers, often from towering cumulonimbus clouds. And third, we have orographic lift. This happens when a physical barrier, like a huge mountain range, literally forces a large-scale flow of moist air upward. And this orographic lift creates a truly incredible geographic phenomenon. If we compare the two sides of a mountain, on the windward, or upwind side, moist air is forced to rise. It cools, condenses, and dumps some really heavy precipitation. But once that air crosses over the peaks, it's pretty much been depleted of its moisture. So on the leeward, or downwind side, this now dry air descends and actually warms up through compressional heating. This creates what we call a rain shadow. It's exactly why you so often see a lush, wet forest on one side of a mountain and a bone-dry desert like the Mojave or the western side of the Andes sitting squarely on the other. Which leads us perfectly right into Section 4, Global Patterns and Ecosystems, where the water falls. Zooming out to the planetary scale now, the unequal distribution of all this falling water doesn't just dictate where the deserts are, it completely defines the Earth's biomes. Using the Köppen climate classifications, we can clearly see how total rainfall and its seasonality literally draw the map of life on Earth. Think about tropical rainforests. They require massive, consistent moisture, between 1,750 and 2,000 plus millimeters a year, and it's equally distributed so there's no real dry season to speak of. Contrast that with the tropical savanna. It gets less total rain, between 750 and 1,270 millimeters, but more importantly, it experiences severe, distinct wet and dry seasons. Finally, deserts form where precipitation is virtually absent altogether, often trapped under descending, dry, subtropical ridges of air. So, here's the absolutely crucial takeaway. Without this massive freshwater delivery system, terrestrial life just collapses. Precipitation dictates ecosystem productivity, how far a species can actually range, and the absolute limits on population sizes. Plants obviously needed to grow, and in areas with distinct wet and dry seasons, animal populations have to constantly adapt to food shortages before the rainy season harvests finally arrive. It really is the lifeblood of the biosphere. Let's transition over to our final section. Section 5, Humanity's Impact on Precipitation, Altering the Water Cycle. Human activities are measurably shifting these ancient weather patterns, and it's essential we examine the data to see exactly how this is occurring. The source data points to three main anthropogenic, or human-caused influences. First, the burning of fossil fuels and agricultural activities increase greenhouse gases, raising overall atmospheric temperatures. This altered temperature directly impacts evaporation rates and large-scale atmospheric circulation. Second, deforestation. Trees return a massive amount of rainfall back up to the atmosphere through transpiration. Cutting them down drastically decreases the water cycling through that local environment. Third, and perhaps the most surprising, are urban heat islands. The concrete and infrastructure of our cities actually trap heat, forcing extra upward air motion. The data reveals a pretty stark reality regarding this urban heat island effect. If we index the standard rainfall upwind of a major city at 100, the excess heat generated by the city actually induces additional shower and thunderstorm activity just beyond it. Rainfall rates downwind of cities jump significantly. They increase between 48% and 116%. That means the downwind impact hits an index between 148 and a staggering 216 compared to the upwind side. Cities are literally generating their own localized weather patterns. Which leaves us with this final thought. We've seen how delicate the balance of temperature, dew point, and atmospheric circulation truly is. As global temperatures continue to change, and as expanding concrete cities force brand new updrafts into the sky, how will your local precipitation patterns be redrawn in the decades to come? It's a profound question for sure, and understanding the science we mapped out today is the very first step in finding the answer. Thanks so much for joining me for this explainer, and keep learning.